Blight Spear is arguably one of the most powerful solo speed farm builds in Diablo, period. And since we made that guide months ago, you guys have been asking for a Blight Spear Q&A video, and guess what? Today, we're finally gonna deliver. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, first and foremost, I want to say Blight Spear is not going to be the easiest build you've ever played in Diablo. This is not a Condemned Crusader where you're face rolling, you're just hitting spacebar through the rift and everything dies. This is a very challenging and difficult build to play, but once you master it, it is so rewarding to play. During this video, we're going to play some GR95 footage. And you might be thinking, Fluff, you have, 2600 Paragon and your gear is really good. But I am doing a GR95. I've had people message me on non-season that have like 3K, 4K Paragon telling me they're speeding 106s, which is just crazy. There's no limit to the power of this build. Now, one of the first things you're going to notice that's changed since we made that video, again, we made that video on PTR back in season 11. And since then, really no skills have changed. We did swap out one passive, and it's a pretty important thing to note. We dropped Rigor Mortis for Wrathma Shield. Now, Rigor Mortis is really, really nice in this build because it gives you a way to proc that 100% damage bonus on Crispin Sentence outside of Land of the Dead. But as you continue to push the build to the upper limits of what it can do for speed, Wrathma Shield really becomes invaluable, because the worst thing that can happen in Blight Spear is you pop your Land of the Dead, your big cooldown, and then you die right after. Like, that's the worst thing that can happen. So Wrathma Shield, obviously, one, you can't die for 4 seconds after you cast it, your Land of the Dead, which is awesome. But two, you can use your Land of the Dead defensively, which can be really, really nice. And this has so many use cases. One thing, you can pop your Land of the Dead before you touch a pylon, because as you guys know, spawning elites with the Nemesis Bracers, sometimes elite spawns and just like one-shots you. So if you pop Wrathma Shield right before you touch the pylon, you're invulnerable to damage and he can't one-shot you. That's just one use case. Another issue we see all the time when people come in and they ask their questions is they're not getting the proper damage stacks for Nair's Black Death. Now, Nair's Black Death, of course, it reads, each different poison skill you use increases the damage of your poison skills by 100% for 15 seconds. So one of the things we see all the time is people get their Nair's Black Death stack for casting their spear. They get their Nair's Black Death stack for casting bone armor. But what they forget is you actually have to manually cast Corpse Lance in order to get that third stack. And we touched on the video, but I really want to drive that home because it's a really common mistake that we see. The 2-piece Pestilence does not proc the third stack of Nair's Black Death. Even though you have the proper Corpse Lance slotted, you actually have to manually cast the Corpse Lance in order to get the third stack. The auto lance that kicks off when you devour doesn't stack the third stack. Another thing we see a lot is when you first enter the Rift, you want to make sure you have your Goguk stacks up before you cast your Land of the Dead. Now, if you can get it to like 10, that's probably good enough right at the start of a Rift. But we see a lot where people are like, ooh, you see Elite Pack and boom, you pop Land of the Dead. Make sure you try to get those Goguk stacks up as fast as you can, because, more cooldown reduction, more attack speed is just going to benefit you in the long run. And also keep those Goguk stacks up throughout the Rift. Sometimes you'll zone, sometimes you'll lose your Goguk stacks. So you really need to pay attention to your stacks on your bottom buff bar here. Because if those stacks drop and you cast your next Land of the Dead, guess what? You just missed out on 15% cooldown reduction. Another thing we see a lot is knowledge about Blood is Power. And Blood is Power has a lot of people confused. So you want, between every cast of Land of the Dead, you want to actually try to take just a little bit of damage, if you can. Now, the build isn't super dependent upon this effect, but if you utilize this effect, you are going to get faster clear times, and this build is all about speed. Now, another question we get all the time is, Fluff, this build is so squishy, I'm just dying left and right. What am I doing wrong? And the answer really is you're probably not doing anything wrong, really. This build is squishy, and a lot of you guys are not going to want to hear that. But it is squishy, and you need to understand how to avoid damage in order to survive in this build. And a huge way you avoid damage in this build is using Blood Rush. Blood Rush, as soon as you cast that Blood Rush, you get this like second of invulnerability. And you can use that to your advantage. So say like Molten's going to explode, and you know the timing of Molten, you can Blood Rush right as it explodes, and you won't take any of the damage. Even though you're standing right inside of it, you can actually avoid it just by Blood Rushing. And that, stuff like that comes with playtime. The more you play Blight Spear, the less you're going to be thinking about the skills you're actually casting, and the more you're going to be considering avoiding damage. So the less I'm having to think like, oh my gosh, what am I casting? Spear. Oh my gosh, my Land of the Dead cooldown, is it going to run out here? The less you're thinking about that and the more you're actually looking at your character and avoiding arrows, avoiding spears, avoiding stuff that's going to kill you, the more tanky you're going to become. And I can't say enough, and it sounds strange to say, but the more damage you gain with this build, the more inherently tanky you'll feel. So the more augments you get, the higher paragon you get, you're going to feel more tanky, and you're going to be able to continue stepping up those GRs, because more intelligence is not only going to get you more damage, so you're going to kill elites faster, but it's also going to get you more resistances, which will up your toughness. Another thing you'll see me do a lot when you see me play the build is after we've procced in-geom and we're just spamming Blood Rush, you'll see in between a lot of my Blood Rush spam that I'm actually hitting Bone Armor Dislocation to stun all the mobs around me. This just makes sure that as I'm passing by them, none of them can one-shot me. And it keeps up my stacks of Go-Go with Swiftness without having me to cast a spear. But you also see me cast spears. If I feel I can safely cast a spear on the way to the next elite pack, I'm definitely going to try to do that. Now, the biggest tip we can give you is what we call the dance. So what I call the dance is, people ask me all the time, Fluff, are you casting Corpse Lance? Are you casting Bone Spear? Like, what are you casting? I don't understand what you're doing. So this build is obviously all about Land of the Dead. And the simplest way to say it is you're always spamming Bone Spear unless you don't think you're going to get the elite kill before Land of the Dead expires. So if you're sitting there and you're spamming Bone Spears and you don't think you're going to get the elite kill before Land of the Dead expires, you need to switch over to spamming Corpse Lance. If you spam Corpse Lance on a specific target, it's going to get that target dead really, really fast. And that's the primary goal of every Land of the Dead cast. If you don't have an elite on your screen, you should not be casting Land of the Dead. This build is all about elite killing. You'll kill a whole bunch of stuff on the way, but ultimately this is an elite sniper build. So if you have an elite on your screen, you're going to pop Land of the Dead, you're going to spam your Bone Spears. If you don't think you're going to kill the elite before Land of the Dead expires, you need to switch over and be spamming Corpse Lances and then get that kill, because that's the most important thing. You got to proc an in-geom proc every single time you cast Land of the Dead. If you don't, you are going to slow this build down. And of course, there's some caveats to that. So say you get a double pack of bleeds. So say you have like a triple blue and a yellow pack. You can basically not cast Bone Spear altogether. Obviously, you want to cast Bone Spear to get that third stack of Nair's Black Death. But you can completely just spam Corpse Lance, because you know that if you get a double proc of in-geom, you're gonna have Land of the Dead up by the time you reach the next elite pack. And you want to be spamming Corpse Lance to make sure you kill them both in one rotation of Land of the Dead. And so that's something you guys have to play with to know what you can kill, what you can't kill, when you should be spamming Bone Spear versus when you should be Corpse Lancing. And these are things you'll pick up as you continue to play the build. One of the questions I get a lot too is, you know, how do I know how high I should be farming? The way I usually describe it, and it's kind of an interesting measure of power, I like to say that if you can consistently kill a Juggernaut, which as you guys know are the fun suckers of Diablo and the nemesis to the Necromancer. If you can kill a Juggernaut in one rotation of Land of the Dead, you're fine. If you cannot consistently kill a Juggernaut inside of one rotation of Land of the Dead, you're probably doing a GR that's too high for you. Which leads me into Juggernauts. As you guys know, Juggernauts are immune to CC, so they can be very, very dangerous for the Blight Spear. So a huge thing you want to take note of, and just in general for this build, is the Oculus Ring. The Oculus Ring is your friend in this build. If you can stand inside the Oculus Ring, it's going to increase your damage by an insane amount. 85% damage multiplier. So if you can be standing in the circle, stand in that circle. And the higher you go with this build, you're going to be using that circle to your advantage. Just like you would in the Pestilence push build, you're going to focus down kind of a weak trash mob on your screen, get that Oculus circle on the ground, pour inside of that as fast as you can, and just start annihilating everything on the screen. But that's basically all there is to it. Hopefully that's helped some of you guys kind of figure out what you're doing wrong. If you guys head over to the stream at any point, you'll see me playing this build pretty much non-stop during the season. I'm primarily a solo player, and this build is what I think to be the fastest solo speed farm build in the game. And a lot of players have commented that watching me play the build, since I play it every day, I know it inside and out. It helps them figure out what they're supposed to be doing. So that might help you as well. If you guys have any more questions, of course, please leave them in the comment section below. You guys will notice, you know, I feel like I'm pretty on top of answering the questions. If you ask a question, just as long as that question hasn't been asked like 1,000 times already, you'll get an answer. But again, hopefully this will help you guys in Season 14. There's going to be a lot of Blight Spear Necromancers asking questions. Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, come over to Twitch, ask your questions. We love you guys. Peace out.